Okay, so let's just jump right in. Think about it for a second. You're on the bus, you're at the gym, maybe walking through the office, and everyone, I mean everyone, is plugged in. Headphones on, sealed off in their own little world of sound. But you're not. You're just there, in the quiet. Everybody else seems to need that constant soundtrack, right? And it probably makes you wonder, why don't I? People might think it's a little strange, but what if your preference for silence isn't a lack of something? What if it's actually a sign of something much, much deeper going on? You've probably felt the vibe, right? Or at least heard the labels, that you're kind of robotic, maybe boring, or just a little weird for not needing music blasting 24/7. But what if the reality is the complete opposite? What if what they see as a flaw is actually a sign that you are more focused, more in control, and way more aware than most? So that brings us to what we can call the myth of silence. Let's really dig into why what people see on the outside, it just isn't what's really happening on the inside. This right here gets to the absolute heart of it. You aren't empty inside. Not at all. Your mind is just operating on a completely different frequency, one that simply doesn't require constant external noise to function. It's not a bug, it's a feature. So how do we get our heads around this? Well, let's look at it through this lens of the thinker versus the consumer. We're going to unpack these two totally different ways of engaging with the world. Now, what's really fascinating here is the difference in intention. The consumer, they feel the silence specifically to avoid thinking. That noise is like a wall blocking their own thoughts. But the thinker? Oh, the thinker actively protects the silence because that's what's needed to start thinking. For you, silence is an empty space. It's the workshop. It's where the real work gets done. Okay, so if you're sitting there nodding along, identifying as a thinker, what does that actually look like in practice? Let's break down 5 key signs of this focused mindset. And let's call them what they are, the superpowers of a silent mind.
It all kicks off with something called cognitive bandwidth. Now, don't let the fancy term throw you. Just think of it like your brain's RAM. You only have so much of it. It's the limited mental energy you have at any given moment for problem solving, creativity, the heavy lifting.
And here is the crucial bit. Every song, every podcast, every little bit of audio, it eats up some of that precious bandwidth. Your brain knows this instinctively. So it prioritizes deep processing, the important stuff, over cheap entertainment. You're not avoiding noise. You're just saving your mental energy for what really matters.
All right, let's move to our second sign, emotional regulation. This isn't just about being calm. We're talking about the advanced skill of managing and controlling your own emotional state from the inside out. It's a huge sign of maturity and self-control.
So while other people might need a hype playlist to get motivated or a sad song to wallow in after a tough day, you just don't. That's because you have what's known as an internal locus of control. You generate and manage your own feelings instead of needing an external track to tell you how to feel.
The third sign is that you naturally sidestep something called the dopamine trap. This is that addictive little cycle of always looking for small, easy rewards from outside stuff, like the hook of a catchy song that keeps your brain hooked and always wanting another quick, cheap hit.
And this is exactly how that trap works, right? It starts with that feeling of boredom or emptiness. That feeling makes you seek out some stimulus, like grabbing your headphones. You get that cheap hit of the feel-good chemical dopamine, but it fades super fast, which just starts the whole cycle over again. It keeps you hooked.
But for you, sitting in silence isn't being bored. It's a healthy recalibration. You're actually resetting your dopamine baseline. You're pretty much immune to the cheap hits that keep everyone else distracted, because you get your satisfaction from actual progress and deep thought, not just from passively consuming something.
Superpower number 4 is all about your powerful verbal reasoning. This is that constant inner monologue you've got going on, that voice in your head that's always analyzing, processing, and trying to make sense of everything around you.
And here's the simple truth, isn't it? You don't always need music, because a lot of the time, your own thoughts are just louder and way more interesting than any lyric could ever be. You're not trying to avoid external noise. You're just already tuned in to an internal signal that's way more compelling. And that brings us to our 5th and final sign, a heightened interoceptive awareness. This is the amazing, often overlooked skill of really listening to your own body and noticing all the subtle details of your environment, your own breathing, the hum of the fridge, the sound of the wind outside. And this is a really profound difference. While others are actively trying to drown out the world to escape the present moment with a soundtrack, you are fully present in it.
You're connected to reality in a way that, let's be honest, is becoming incredibly rare.
So let's tie this all together. What does all this mean? We need to talk about your power and silence, and why this trait of yours is such a rare and seriously valuable strength in the world we live in today. If you're that person walking down the street without headphones, don't ever think of yourself as strange. Think of it this way. You are one of the very few people left who can actually stand to be alone with their own thoughts. And in this day and age, that is a formidable ability. In a world that just keeps getting louder and more distracting every single day, never forget this. In a noisy world, silence is the ultimate power.
It really just leaves us with one final question to think about. While everyone else is busy listening to the noise, what important signal are you hearing in the silence?